Preoccupations is a post-punk band formerly known as Viet Cong. Some of the members reformed Viet Cong after Women had disbanded in like 2010. Women was also a very good band, released a few great albums in the 2000s, and then 2010 they released a fantastic album too. After disbanding, they did form Viet Cong. A few of the members anyway formed Viet Cong, and Viet Cong was a really cool post-punk band. I think went a little bit overlooked, honestly. I think a lot of people just basically labeled them as a generic post-punk band, which I completely disagree with. I thought they had a lot of flavour to them and had some fantastic songs on that album. But they decided to change their name because so many bands do that now when it's slightly offensive. You know, Andrew Jackson Jihad did that too. Fuck Buttons changed their name to F Buttons. Just something slightly offensive, bands just go on to change their name. I guess it's fine, but I usually just don't see why. And in my opinion, when bands change their name, their music typically gets a little bit worse. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but it just seems to be that way with some of the bands that have changed their names over the past few years. I do believe Preoccupations' debut album was okay. Didn't grab me as much as Viet Cong's album. I thought it was pretty alright. It had some cool ideas, but I just didn't connect with it. And New Material is an album which I do prefer, mostly because I feel like it's a little bit more melodic than the debut album, Preoccupations. It's just this time around, I guess it's a bit more standard. Like, I think if you loved that first album from them in 2016, I don't think you're going to love this one as much, because I do think that they were doing some interesting things on that album. It just didn't hit me as much as it did other people, but this time around they're pretty much playing it to the post-punk rulebook. You're pretty much going to hear Joy Division covers on this album, honestly. So much of this album just reminds me of Joy Division. The vocals remind me of someone else too. Can't think of who it is, but there's a post-punk band out there that has a very similar vocalist to this band here, and I can't think of who it is. Maybe I'll remember, and by that point it won't matter because my review will already be out, but hey. I'm reminded a little bit of The Cure at points too, not with the vocals, but just with the way the guitars and the bass kind of like groove along. That rhythm section totally gives me like the Cure vibes from like Disintegration or maybe other Cure projects as well. There is this haunting tone across this album, but it doesn't really hit you in a haunting way like a Proto-Martyr album would, like their last album from last year, Relatives in Descent. It's nowhere near as like gritty as that. It's nowhere near as like ghoulish as that, honestly. It's pretty much just post-punk jams, and when I say jams, these tracks do jam. I mean, a lot of them I'm getting my head moving along at the pace of the guitar and the drums. Like, everything's there. All the ingredients are there for a great album. It just doesn't quite reach it, I don't think. I just don't think it ends up being like a solid album in a genre of music that's pretty much got all of its ideas together by now, and no bands really added that much new to it. It's just I expected from this band who've been at it for quite a long time now, under obviously all the different names, I expected a little bit more. The closing track really does leave a lot to be desired too. It's just this instrumental track, and honestly, I don't know if they thought they were doing something cool here, but it really doesn't reach anywhere. Like, you're just listening to it thinking, like, could this, like, elevate to something? Could they jam out and turn it into a really cool session for a closing track? And none of that happens. It's like a leftover instrumental that they just thought, well, we didn't really write any music to go with this song, so we'll just put it at the end of the album. It's kind of random, honestly. I don't feel like it was a very good way to close it off. And there's really not much more else to say with this album. I expected having loads to say going into it. But here I am, just coming out of this album thinking it's a pretty standard, by-the-numbers post-punk album that is enjoyable for what it is, but I can't help but think so many other bands recently have done this better. Proto-Martyr, Grave Babies, Beast Milk, Savages, Ice Age, even Viet Cong, the band that they were formerly known as, obviously Joy Division, Bauhaus, you know, the classic post-punk artists back in the day, Echo and the Bunnymen, all really did bring something to the table that was very fresh and very different. This doesn't, but I like it when it's on. I'll give it that. Like, it's not terrible, it's not boring. It's quite exhilarating at times, but not as exhilarating as I've heard before, so it ends up just being kind of passable. So I'm going to say it's a C+. Pretty solid album, pretty solid. Talented band that really deserve to be pushing themselves more because they are very good. But this album doesn't really showcase the best of their abilities by far. I do hope they drop something in the next few years that pushes the boundaries a little bit more. But for now, go listen to this and go listen to all the other bands I've mentioned in this video. Let me know your thoughts on this album if you've heard it, subscribe to the channel for more reviews, and have a good day.